In this short series, I will impart all of my knowledge around Pokemon to you, including my favorite Pokemon passive abilities that you can use for a brand new playthrough, how to complete your Pokédex if you haven't done so already. We are going to complete your Pokédex together. The best encounter rate and sparkling power sandwiches without needing salty Herba Mysticas. The best ways to hunt shinies. Trading Pokemon, including trading your regular Pokemon for shinies and legendaries. I haven't found this anywhere on the internet or people are straight up lying. How to give a nickname even to a foreign Pokemon. Finally, everything about EV and IV training and also breeding. Easy ways to make lots of money in Scarlet and Violet. How to prepare your team for Tera Raids. And why half of the moves just don't even work properly. And finally, terrestrialization, why it sucks and how to fix it. Some of these tips are Scarlet and Violet specific, but some are like Paradox Pokemon. Most of the information can be used for past or future Pokemon games as well. In return for this information, all I ask of you is to listen to what I have to say, even if it seems like it's not useful to you at the time. Don't forget to give this video a rating, subscribe if you knew that Remoraid was a gun, or if you knew that Octillery was a tank. Whenever you want to give a review to someone and you don't want to hurt their feelings, you want to do it in the positive sandwich style. So you start with something positive, you put all the negative stuff in the middle, and then you end on a positive note. Unfortunately, when it comes to this game, the positive sandwich is going to be more like the encounter level 2 sandwiches, where the positive bottom bread is going to be really thin. There's going to be a bunch of negative toppings on the sandwich, and remember, you don't need the top bread. So to start out, I want to motivate you to replay this game, not just Scarlet and Violet, but Sword and Shield or any of the previous games. So I want to recommend you some really cool Pokemon abilities that recontextualize the game. So you might not know about EV training. Basically, you either want to train your physical attack or your special attack power. Obviously it differs in versus mode. I don't really know much about versus mode, so you guys can help me out in the comment section below. But there is one Pokemon ability. It's not a good ability, but let's be honest, if you want to have fun in this game, it's so easy that you just want to make the game more difficult. So there is an ability called Moody. What Moody does is each turn it raises one of your random stats by 2 stages, and then it lowers another one by 1 stage. And what this forces you to do, unlike any other ability in a single player setting of course, is you want to bring a physical attack and a special attack at the very least, because one game you might get special attack increase, in another game you might get physical attack increase, but you also might get, you know, defense or special defense, so you might want to bring those stat raising abilities as well. Unfortunately, in Scarlet and Violet, the only Pokemon that have the Moody ability are Snorunt and Glalie, and also Scovillain, which has it as a hidden ability. Another cool way to have a new playthrough is through weather teams, so kind of like Rayhan from Sword and Shield, Sandstorm Dragon Trainer guy. You can have a team based around snow. Snow was recently buffed or changed in Scarlet and Violet, so it's a little bit better than before. But of course Sandstorm, or you can have a sort of Chlorophyll, Fire, Grass type, Harsh Sunlight team. You can set the weather with one Pokemon and switch it into another one that benefits from the weather. Of course, these are things that make the game a little bit harder. You don't just sweep through the entire single player playthrough with just one Pokemon. But I really like weather and Pokemons that can change it just with an ability. Some other abilities worth mentioning, like Skill Link. It also recontextualizes some moves. So multi-strike moves Like the icicle spear would always hit 5 times. Unfortunately, the only Pokemon in this recent expansion is Cloyster. Ambipom is coming in the DLC. But very similarly, Sharpness, Strong Jaw, and Liquid Voice, which is not yet available, buff certain moves like biting moves or slicing moves. I'm not even sure which ones these are, but you have a bunch of Pokemon that can make use of this ability, and you might use moves that you wouldn't otherwise use. Probably the best example of abilities like this is the ability Technician. Anything below 60 damage or 60 damage you just wouldn't otherwise use, but this ability boosts their power. Another cool, popular, and surprisingly difficult way to replay the single player games is to use monotype teams. Back in Sword and Shield, my very first playthrough, I've actually decided to use a mono ghost type team. It was easy for a while, but when I got to the gym leader girl with the bare feet that had a Pangoro, she kicked my ass a couple of times until I overcame her. Forcing yourself to use only one type of Pokemon on your team makes you appreciate the environment design. Whenever I found a new ghost to put on my team, it felt like finding a shiny because they are quite rare. Unfortunately, I ran into the problems of trade evolutions, which I despise with my very core. In 2023, trade-only evolutions have no place in the games. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure at some point trade evolutions were a cool way to make friends in the schoolyard, but nowadays it's just a disaster waiting to happen. So in Sword and Shield I had to wait around 3 days until I finally found someone on Discord to help me evolve my Haunter to a Gengar. Not really sure why someone would steal a normal non-shiny Gengar, but I'm sure it happened before. I also had a Haunter in my Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl playthrough. It was really funny because I didn't use Discord, I went into a trade room, I signaled to the guy that I want to trade my Haunter, he obliged and he wanted to be really nice to me, so he traded back a level 50 Gengar instead, which of course I could not use because I didn't have any badges, and he just quit the game. I'm not saying they should remove trade evolutions altogether, but they should have an alternative way in the games to trade evolve your Pokemon, let's say for 5 or 10,000 yen. And then trade evolutions with real world players would still be a better alternative because they are free. Graveler and Machoke are trade evolutions. Did you know that the reason Golem has a lizard-like head is because he got it from Machamp, and Machamp has 4 arms because he got it from Graveler. You don't need to specifically trade these two lines to evolve them, but maybe they did at some point. So in many reviews, when it comes to Scarlet and Violet, YouTubers like to talk about, was it a natural progression for Pokemon to become an open world RPG game, or was it more like Zelda, including Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom? Were these games forcing Gamefreak to evolve, no pun intended, and create an open world game? I honestly think that it was both. It's absolutely the natural progression for this franchise to be open world. I mean, even you, viewer, probably have fantasized about this game being open world ever since you were a kid. At the same time, I do not doubt for 1 second that the joint executives of Game Freak, the Pokemon Company, and Nintendo forced developers to make this decision, because these 3 companies jointly own the Pokemon franchise, essentially. It's very interesting that they made this decision, or at the very least they made the decision to not have random encounters in the grass like Sword and Shield did, because there is quite an incentive in these video games for, so I don't know what to call it, but it's sort of like a lottery addiction, where kind of like shiny hunting, it's very addicting. It's a very addicting gameplay loop, even to just have random encounters in the grass. I'm pretty sure they made this decision just randomly to have everything as a normal overworld encounter, and I'm really glad about it, because I think the more they reduce the addicting type of gameplay and the more they increase the actual fun, real, authentic, natural looking world, whatever type of gameplay, the better. One of my first heartaches when I started Scarlet and Violet was the realization, or the re-realization, because I had the same epiphany in Sword and Shield, that, and I know I'm gonna lose people already at this part of the video series, but using status moves is completely unnecessary, and I really hate that. So you have damaging moves. Other moves that don't necessarily deal damage, or not deal damage instantly, are status moves. And I'm not sure about you, but when I was a kid, every single move on my Pokemon team were damaging moves. And I didn't even know about stab. So what stab is an acronym for same type attack bonus. So if you have a fire type Pokemon, it's gonna deal 50% more damage with fire type moves, but it's not gonna deal extra damage with whatever ground or water or normal type moves even. But it didn't really matter when I was a kid, it didn't matter in Sword and Shield, and it doesn't matter now in Scarlet and Violet, because really, even at the very beginning, the first 5 minutes of the game, the first fight you have, the only real way to lose that fight is if you use the status move that you are given. And it's kind of interesting that they actually left this in. They still give you a status moves on your level 5 Pokemon, your starter one, and it's really sad. I would much rather have very broken OP status moves, if that's even possible in the single player game, rather than this Unga Bunga caveman style, just whack the other Pokemon with a damage type move. It's extremely not worth using status moves 99% of the time, and the 1% of the time you probably use them to, I don't know, buff up your starter and then sweep through the entire gym leader team. We will talk a bunch about Tera Raids and terrestrialization, but even in Tera Raids, as you will see, you don't really use that many status moves unless it's belly drum or something really important. There is a really important train of thought that I wanted to discuss with you, and that is the difficulty of the game. Many people say that the reason why Pokemon as a franchise is very easy, or it's becoming much easier even with every expansion, is because it's a children's video game. Now, I'd like to disperse this thought that video games for children are meant to be easy. Whilst it's true that some children throw temper tantrums when losing, I don't think it's the norm. Whenever I think back of myself, or even just stories of hearing people play, I don't know, World of Warcraft at the age of 6, it's clear to see that when you give children a difficult video game, they often rise to the challenge. Even when I started playing like any video game, not even Pokemon, I didn't even speak English when I played my first Pokemon game, but somehow I managed to get through it. Again, by not using status moves, I just spammed the attack moves all day. For children, as long as there are flashy things happening and there are cute Pokemon or badass Pokemon to use, they don't really mind losing that much either. Yes, I know many children hate losing, but it's almost like you don't process losing as losing. I remember picking a grass starter in Emerald, and I just couldn't beat the first gym, so I kind of started over. I picked Torchic instead, and the game just became much easier. I know for sure that I didn't process the thing as losing, because I remember I hated losing, for instance in strategy games. but I didn't really hate losing in Pokemon. The reason why the games are easy are not because they are marketed towards children, but because the developers, or rather the executives, think that that's what children want. In my opinion, you can have your cake and eat it too. You can have a difficult game that both children and adults enjoy. But when you are in doubt, when it comes to the difficulty setting of multiple users, the best thing you can do is just simply add it as a user setting, so people that want a challenge can turn the difficulty on in a heartbeat. I don't think a difficulty scale, easy mode, hard mode, or whatever, would be very difficult to add. I think it would be fairly easy to implement. The developers have some kind of a tool that assigns a Pokemon team or individual Pokemon to a certain trainer. The way the difficulty setting would work, you turn it on in the settings, and suddenly maybe all of the gym leaders have a full 6 team. Maybe the Pokemon have different moves that are more powerful or better abilities or are more EV trained. And at any point you can just go into the settings, turn the difficulty back to the normal or easy, and suddenly the gym leaders again have like the 2, 3, 4 Pokemon that they normally have. You must have already heard about the concept of the Uncanny Valley, where on one side of the spectrum you have very human-like, extremely realistic drawings or photos or whatever, and on the other side you have extremely not human-like drawings, and both of them are sort of fine. But when you are in the very middle, where something is almost human-like but is a little bit weird, it's just weird. Well, there is an uncanny valley for enjoyable difficulty as well, in my opinion. So the enjoyable difficulty of a video game can be like the uncanny valley, where on one hand it can be extremely convenient and not very difficult, and because it's so convenient, it's just very enjoyable. And on the other side of the spectrum, or the line, or whatever, you have a very extremely difficult video game, but that difficulty makes it also almost satisfying to grind, where rising to the challenge and getting closer to your goal is extremely satisfying, even if it's very difficult. I find that Pokemon is in between, so in the worst side of this uncanny valley of enjoyable difficulty. It is becoming more and more convenient with quality of life upgrades or updates, and I do really like that. But because of the unskippable animations, the health not regenerating after fights, it's right in the bottom of the uncanny valley of unenjoyable difficulty.